Well, what's up, everybody? This is welcome to Blind Eye Live. I am Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media, a small internet media company. And I wish I was a little more enthusiastic, but it's just serious stuff to talk about today. Heck, and one of them that I'll have more fun than probably most people would talking about for whatever reason. I'm going to say that for after the crappy subjects to get things kind of back on it. I've got some stuff to split up the topics. So today this morning I opened up ESPN and checked the headlines, and first two things I see are Phillip Adams is the Phillip Adams tragedy that he caused. Phillip Adams is a former NFL player, safety, played for 6 teams over 5 seasons. He was an undrafted free agent. You know, awesome that he was able to stick around for 5 years. That's double the average length of time of an NFL career, which is about 2.5 seasons, which for undrafted guys is even shorter. So 5 years, kudos to the guy. He retired after the 2015 season, suffered in 2012 when he was with the Raiders, he suffered 2 concussions in a 3-game span. So we're gonna get into that, and maybe we'll just go ahead and start since I've given that intro. Some other topics, though, we will be getting into Deshaun Watson. He and his lawyer have filed a grievance against the opposing counsel. We'll get into that. I have some thoughts on. I've taken some time to do some research before rebutting some of this stuff, but March was National Women's Month or International Women's Month, whatever. And on International Women's Day, Megan Rapinoe got up and spoke did a joint thing with the president speaking about equal pay. And I'm going to get into how not only is she wrong, but she's a hypocrite. And she is misleading everyone. She's lying to everyone. And she thinks that every single one of you are stupid and ignorant enough to fall for what they're doing. But I'm going to give you information to show that not only are they equally paid, they actually have more benefits than the men's national team. They are compensated greater than the men's national team, and they have no grievance whatsoever about inequality, at least when it comes to them. So we're going to get into that. And then the back half of the show, I'm going to do my AFC West draft primer. So Tuesday, I made a typo mistake. I was going to do the AFC North, ended up typing in NFC North, so I did the NFC North. So what I've come up with is a pattern, if you will. Almost as if I planned it this way, but I've just admitted that I didn't. So I'm going to do the AFC West today, the NFC South Friday, and then next week I'll rotate through the NFC East, AFC North, NFC West, and the AFC South, which means I get to end with my favorite team. So that it actually kind of works out. So we're going to be doing the AFC West, going team by team. Some needs, some players I think they should target particularly rounds 1 through 3, maybe some day 3 guys, but I'm still working through, or I'm just now working into a lot of the day 3 prospects. So that's why in some of these earlier videos I've been kind of light on that kind of analysis for the back end of the draft. Plus, things get to be a crazy crapshoot after round 4. So with that being said, we're going to get back into, or we're going to get into the first story. Like I said, I did an intro for Phillip Adams, but I guess I'll rehash it real quick. Phillip Adams, former NFL player, safety, started his career as an undrafted free agent with the Niners, played for multiple teams, particularly the Niners, the Raiders, the Jets. I think he spent a year with the Seahawks or some time with the Seahawks. Most notably, though, his rookie year with the Niners. And then in 2012, he was with the Raiders, and he suffered 2 concussions in a 3-game stretch, which I think is possible that it's kind of important to the story. So we'll get into what happened. So Phillip Adams is from Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is basically a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's famous for having some pretty good high school football players come out of Rock Hill. Jadeveon Clowney, if I'm remembering correctly, is from there. It was either him or Melvin Ingram, or they both were, but I think it was Jadeveon Clowney's from Rock Hill, South Carolina. So Phillip Adams, yesterday, or late yesterday afternoon, well, I believe it was around 4:45 Eastern time, 4:45 p.m. Eastern time, a emergency call was made from the Leslie residence in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I believe it's Robert Leslie, Dr. Leslie and his wife, prominent family in Rock Hill. He is a doctor, he spent like 15 years. I could actually should probably pull up the article. Let me set this up. Boom. So I've already gotten to some of it. So Dr. Robert Leslie, 70, and his wife Barbara, 69, pronounced dead at the scene. So Phillip Adams went to this doctor's house, and basically what happened is he gets to the house. A man, 38, I believe his name was like, actually let me scroll down because I believe it's like right here. Man working in the home's James Lewis, 38, was found shot dead outside. It is presumed that he was either the first or the last of the victims in the home. I'm going to say he was the first. But I don't know. It's like he was found dead outside. Then, upon police getting to the interior of the home, Robert and Barbara were found with their 2 grandchildren, who were 5 and 9. Just really, really awful stuff. His father, or Phillip Adams' father, and the sheriff who was doing or who did the findings, were former patients of Dr. Leslie. He had a really rich legacy in the community. Let me get down to that. A neighbor witnessed what happened with Adams later, but I will get to that. I want to talk about Dr. Leslie and his career before. Let me see. He was probably the most well-known person in the community of Rock Hill, a staple in the community. He had started Riverview Medical Center in Rock Hill. this was after he worked for decades as an emergency room doctor. He was certified in both emergency medicine and occupational medicine, and had served as the emergency department medical director for nearly 15 years in Rock Hill General Hospital. This man was an active and positive member of the community, or of the community of Rock Hill. And it's just sad that someone like this, and even worse still, 2 of his grandchildren and his wife were taken as well in this incident. I say incident, this horrific attack. So, also in the article, Allison Hope, a neighbor who lived across from the Adams family, witnessed what happened later. So the whole neighborhood was evacuated. Like, police had sent everyone out around the time this was happening. And around 9 p.m., they were allowed to go back to their homes. And right around this time is when, so Allison Hope has gotten back to her home. She's inside, and then police pull up across the street at the Adams home, in which they spend time negotiating with Adams over loudspeaker. They send in a robot to search and see, like, if there was anyone who was in harm's way in the house, if there were any explosive things like that. It got to a point where they ensured him that, like, his disabled mother would get out safely, and then he caught his own bullet. Just a really, really, like, sad and shocking story. I bring it up because it's an ex-NFL player. But I also bring it up because of the way ESPN wrote this entire article. Well, a lot of this article. They mention this is football's fault, this is this is that. And it's just upsetting. Sorry, I thought I had some kind of alert. Or it's just say upsetting or irritating. It bothers me. Like, I get this is a news story, but and maybe they weren't able to reach anyone, or they decided not to reach out to people on the other side. But I'm tired of the discrepancy in this story compared to stories I've seen in other situations, like with the Colorado shooting, I think it was a couple weeks ago, where everyone was just quick, and rightfully so, to demean and debase the gunman, although a lot of people did so off false information, assuming that it was, and jumping to conclusions about, well, there were headlines about it being white terrorism, and people assuming it was a white dude. It turned out the dude was Syrian. And that it very well would, or that it was likely Islamic terror motivated, although there is dispute about that. Or at least there was dispute about that. I haven't looked at things in the recent, like, few days. Everyone's just real quick to, this guy needed help, this guy needed help. It's so sad. And yes, it is sad. It sucks. What sucks is there are people dead. And one little thing that the agent does say is that he was distant and I don't think he used the word antisocial, but or from some other stuff I've looked at, it seems like he's exhibited antisocial behavior before, like his concussions in 2012, which is kind of what his dad's blaming it on, football messing with his head. And it's possible that CTE had something to do with this, but and it's as just from my own personal opinion here and my own personal feelings, this is way too, like, to me, mournful of him. That's just me. It's a sucky situation, really bad story, and my heart and my prayers go out to the Leslie family, um, and for any of my friends or fellow Christians in the audience, I'd say lift up a prayer for that family because they need it today, and they're going to need it for a while. Moving on to some more like standard news fare. AJ Bowie has been signed by the Panthers. Presumably, that will, depending on what they do with the draft or some other things. Right now, we're presumably penciling him. I've lost my pointer. There it is. AJ Bowie will likely be the starting corner across from Dante Jackson. Seems like it's a 1-year deal. Didn't see any monetary. Didn't see any money when I looked at this last. Yeah. Carolina also signed 10-year veteran Rashawn Melvin to a 1-year deal early in free agency. I missed that. Bowie's 29. So the Panthers really trying to work on their corner depth at the moment. I'm just going to hit the boom. Flip back to there. I think that's a solid signing. The Broncos, who traded for AJ Bowie last year, cut him because he had no guaranteed money left. The Eagles signed, and this was one I definitely wanted to get into. The Eagles have signed linebacker Eric Wilson of the Vikings. They also re-signed running back Jordan Howard, who they signed in 2019. He ended up with an injury that basically limited him the last 6 games of the season. But he ran for like 525 yards, 6 touchdowns over the first 10 games of 2019 for the Eagles. The Dolphins signed him to a 1-year deal last year, cut him during the season. Eagles picked him back up towards the end of the season. They have re-signed him to a 1-year deal, I guess to compete for rotation snaps in the running back room behind Miles Sanders with Boston Scott, but probably just as a depth running back. The bigger story here is Eric Wilson. Eric Wilson had a career year last year. He was a undrafted free agent. I believe, was it undrafted free agent or 7th round pick? I'm honestly a little surprised that, one, Jordan Howard's still only 26. So Eric Wilson was an undrafted free agent. He was a important special teams player for the Vikings, and he was basically their third linebacker coming into last year, which they play a lot of nickel. So usually they only have, or a lot of their snaps, they have two linebackers on the field. And he was in like a rotation role, like alongside, or for snaps as like the third linebacker alongside Anthony Barr and uh, Eric Kendricks in Minnesota. Sorry, Eric's brother Michael. I was trying to remember which one, but Eric is the one on the Vikings, um, and the better player overall. Um, so Eric Wilson, I think is a really good signing for the Eagles. They've had problems at linebacker for years for the most part. It's only a 1-year deal, which actually kind of surprised me. He was one of the more underrated guys in free agency. I couldn't believe that like Gerard Davis signed with the Jets, like as soon as he did, like on a 1-year deal. But Eric Wilson was still sitting around. Um, Although linebacker was definitely one of the positions that got squeezed the most this offseason, um, which I expected. Eric Wilson is young enough, and he's coming off a great year. So last year, week 2, um, Anthony Barr tore his pectoral, had to have season-ending surgery. From then on, Eric Wilson played 100% of the defensive snaps for Minnesota. And he was particularly great in pass coverage. But he had an incredible year, 122 total tackles. He tied for the NFL lead among linebackers in interceptions. I believe another category. Let's see. Oh, it's right here. Wilson, 26, tied for the NFL lead among linebackers with 3 interceptions in 2020. And he also had 3 sacks. Sorry, that sneeze hurt. I did something in my nose earlier, and I had to stop a nosebleed. Luckily I was able to get it stopped and fixed before going live, but that sneeze hurt just now. 3 interceptions, tied for NFL lead among linebackers. 3 sacks, 8 passes defense to go with 122 tackles. Definite breakout season. So I really thought that he'd get a decent payday. Not necessarily, I wouldn't expect him to be like top of the market kind of payday like Corey Littleton got last year, which was a little bit of an overpay. But I kind of expect him to get something close to like maybe what Nick Kwiatkowski got from the Raiders last year, or maybe a little less under this market. But he's signing a 1-year deal with the Eagles. He should be an upgrade there. The one concern with his game is maybe in run defense. He had like 20 missed tackles last year. And he had like a run defense grade from Pro Football Focus of like a 38.3 or 3 grade, which is not, I want to say was like maybe last among linebackers who played like a certain number of snaps last year. Although I think that's still a little misleading. One, I don't think they grade their linebackers very well. There's a lot of Pro Football Focus's grades that I don't think they do a very good job yet of quantifying positions or player value. Because Devin White last year, I think, had like a 58 grade or something like that, a grade in the 50s, and he was an All-Pro, and he was clearly an All-Pro. So, but part of the problem with Minnesota was they had a very weak defensive line as well. So that doesn't necessarily excuse all the missed tackles. I haven't watched all of his tape, but if linemen were able to just really open big holes and get upfield and maybe get a hand on him, you can miss a tackle while also getting blocked and that causing you to miss the tackle. But I'm going to say he definitely probably, with a grade that low, I would say he definitely struggled in the run game. Like 20 missed tackles is a red flag, but he did have 122. This is an ascending player, an improving player, and and his coverage ability is super valuable in today's NFL. And the Eagles' defense needs improvements wherever they can get them. I mean, their pass defense was pretty horrid last year. So I think this is a really good signing for the Eagles. Let's check these headlines, see if there's anything else interesting. Oh yeah. So Justin Fields is having a second pro day. The 49ers are going to be in attendance for. I'm still not totally sold on the idea that Mac Jones is going 3 to San Fran. Although I think it would be a fine pick. I think it would be a really good pick, personally. And, and there's a big thing going around. Brady did an interview with Michael Strahan for Good Morning America, and he said, I realized that there isn't just the Patriot way. There are other ways to do things, or basically along those lines. And everyone's like, oh, he's throwing Bill Belichick under the bus. I actually don't think it's that. I think it was just, there are other ways to do things that can work. Because he spent 20 years with the Patriots, with Belichick, doing things the Belichick way, the Patriot way. And Arians is a totally different animal. Far more of a... People use the term player's coach, and I would definitely say more so than Bill Belichick, but I think if you jive with the way a coach does things, that coach can be a player's coach for that type of player. Although Bill Belichick's way more no-nonsense. Most of the time people think of a player's coach as someone who lets players have more personality, isn't maybe as regimented, whatever, more relaxed. Which is how people describe kind of like your Andy Reid. Andy Reid's another guy people consider like a player's coach. So yeah. Or Pete Carroll, although maybe Russell Wilson not so much anymore, considering him that. With that being said, we're going to get into our second story. I hate these just autoplay videos. So Deshaun Watson's lawyer, Rusty Hardin, it has been granted, or he's been granted the emergency hearing over a woman's ID. So let's get into it. Deshaun Watson attorney Rusty Hardin has filed a motion Thursday for an emergency hearing asking a judge to order lawyer Tony Busby, or to rule that Tony Busby has to identify one of the women who filed a lawsuit under the pseudonym Jane Doe. This motion was granted by the Harris County District Court, with the hearing scheduled for Friday, noon Eastern Time, so that would be 11 Central Time, where Houston is located. Hardin plans to submit the same filing Thursday for each of the plaintiffs. So before going on, well, I guess we can do it right here. Of the 22 lawsuits filed against Watson alleging inappropriate behavior and sexual assault, only 2 women have been publicly identified. And this is important because you cannot defend yourself against claims from individuals whom you are not aware of who they are. And it's possible that, yes, you could go through and, based on information in the lawsuits, if enough of that information is given in the lawsuits, determine who those people are. But at the same time, the idea here is I cannot defend myself against accusations when I can't face my accuser to know exactly who it is that I'm dealing with. Because with so many cases here, and maybe interactions he has with people during the day, which I'm like, if you're setting up multiple massages during the day, which I'm not saying is what's happening, I'm just thinking through here. Um, but the argument for the lawyer, and actually, I'll go down and get to where the lawyer makes the argument himself. This one specifically pertains to lawsuit 2021-15937, which was filed March 18th. Because the lawsuits were filed separately, Hardin would need to file a motion for each one. Sorry, individually, not separately. But yeah, individually. So none of these lawsuits aren't part of one big case. They're all individual cases. When we asked Mr. Busby to identify his clients weeks ago, he refused and told us to file a motion, Hardin said in a statement. Today, we filed that motion. As discussed on our filing, Mr. Busby's use of anonymous lawsuits violates Texas law and the basic concept of fairness. While I understand that anonymity often is used as a shield for victims, Mr. Busby is using it as a sword. While shielding his clients from public scrutiny, Mr. Busby continues to use their anonymous allegations to destroy Mr. Watson. This is simply not right, and we look forward to resolving these matters in court. In the motion, Hardin writes that because plaintiff's counsel filed these actions anonymously, Mr. Watson's counsel can only speculate about plaintiff's identity. Mr. Watson's counsel cannot, in good conscience, publicly respond to the specific allegations being made because any response would be based on dangerous speculation about the identity of the accusers, Hardin said in the motion. It is easy to imagine the harm that would be caused if Miss Doe was mistakenly identified. The only way to allow Mr. Watson to properly defend himself is for the court to follow the law by requiring Miss Doe to identify herself in her civil lawsuit. And so here's the other thing. These are not underage women, or at least it doesn't seem that way, or else it would be everywhere. So there have been some people since this has come out. I've seen already some takes of, well, a lot of, or victims in the Nassar cases and or were left, or in different other cases were left anonymous, and it's because they were underage. They were not adults; they were minors. These are all adults, and we do have in the legal system, and particularly here in the state of Texas, a right to face our accuser. And it's not, and from what I've seen in all of these, none of these have outright claimed like full-on rape, and it seemed, which I just used a hard R word for YouTube, but I'm not monetized yet or anything, so, and I'm a tiny channel, so it probably doesn't matter. But I wasn't seeing anything of that, like that severeness. So I don't think the court would try and shield these people. And obviously this is a tactic from Mr. Busby because when a lawsuit is filed, you have a specific amount of time to file your response to that lawsuit, which typically, or it seems in this court, is a month. Because for a number of these cases, I believe in the article it says April 19th is like the deadline. So when these were filed, because when this says weeks ago, which would have been, it's been like 3 weeks since the first of these cases were filed, he said weeks ago they filed, or they asked him to basically name his clients, and he refused and is forcing them to, file a motion. This is a strategy by Busby. I would take this as a strategy by Busby to force them into drafting up documents and hearings. And one, he's probably going to fight and try and see if he can keep some of them anonymous, or all of them, whatever, because that would greatly hurt the defense's ability to defend this case. I don't think that's going to happen. So, to me, this, and I'm not a lawyer, but I follow a lot of legal analysis. I do some research. And I have talked to a friend of mine who is a lawyer, and his opinion, and my opinion, is that this is a delay tactic in order to make or shorten the amount of time the defense has to make its cases, or to properly go over and build cases, which deviously smart. But that's not necessarily a fact. That is an opinion. But under Texas law, you cannot just you have to, unless the court says otherwise, because I believe there have been, or the court can make special exceptions. I don't think it's like, and I've seen some opinion that these cases shouldn't have been allowed to even be filed under or without proper identification of the plaintiffs. But I have seen dispute over that. So, anyway, this motion was granted to Hardin for this emergency hearing, which will happen Friday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. Eastern. And so we'll, after, that hearing, we'll learn some more, but and as Hardin said, he's going to, and the reason they only filed one motion is that if this motion didn't work, they could rework the others to get them tomorrow, or just not bother, or maybe not bother, but I figured they would continue to bother with it. This allowed them to be like, okay, this one's getting granted, we'll just run the rest of these the same way, and they'll get granted. So, which two of these people came out publicly, I think it was last week. So, one gave a statement. This little video here that ESPN was auto-playing is one of these people giving a statement. That seemed a little cliche of a statement. And just personally, it was very, rehearsed. It didn't seem real or natural. Not that means that her claims are false. That's not what I'm saying. It was just very rehearsed. And she's obviously reading her statement. And then the other was read by a female attorney on Busby's staff. That was a letter from one of the others who named themselves. But basically, the base argument here is we cannot defend ourselves against people that we don't know who they are. Because it would be dangerous speculation for us to attach a possible name in our defense and then it not be that person. because apparently Deshaun Watson was getting so many massages from so many people, is the way I'm thinking of it, that he can't remember which person he was with on which given day or whatever. Which it also would be, it is kind of hard pressed. If someone were to ask me what I did on May 23rd of last year, I honestly right now on the spot couldn't tell you. So, but anyway, so there has been movement, and Deshaun Watson and his counsel are making moves in Deshaun Watson's defense. So we have some action, people, on that case. This is going to be interesting because the more I'm seeing and the more I'm looking into it, this seems, I just have a lot of red flags with this one. Let's say that. Let's see, what time is it? 2:40. Man, I'm kind of blowing through stuff right now. Let's do this. Let's kind of scroll down through some of the articles. Let's see what's going on. And nothing like super interesting. Uh-oh. That actually is probably an interesting article, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Gosh, I hate these stupid autoplay things on their site. So, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get into my AFC West draft primer, since I really don't have any. Oh, wait, I was going to do the... Oh, that was the other thing I was going to do. So, you know what? I'm going to wait on that. I'm going to get into... So I want to talk about the women's national soccer team and this whole equal pay crap that they're pushing, because, and I'm going to outline it for you. I don't have a bunch of stuff drawn up or put up because I'm not the best at graphic design, but these numbers are readily available, and I will actually, if you want more information or don't want to take my word for it, there is a channel named Nate the Lawyer, and he did a breakdown last week of the women's national team's complaints. And he went in and he looked over the contracts, the bonuses, everything. And he did an amazing breakdown of this, because he made arguments that weren't even part of my arguments early on. And I learned information from that. And I did my own, or did some, Googling, and found, these these documents and everything. And it's plain as day that not only is the women's national team not being paid less than the men, which they're focusing on one snippet of the payment or the pay structure, that they're saying, well, we get paid less. The thing is, they get paid in ways that the men's players don't. A lot of ways, actually. But I'm going to start from the beginning, and I've said some of this earlier, back last month during one of my earlier streams. So anyone who listened to that, you'll be aware, or you'll probably remember me saying this, but the women's national team in the early 2000s. It was either late or around 2000. The men's national team and the women's national team were offered basically new deals for how they were going to be paid going forward. They were under a structure that's called paid to play, which basically means you play, you get paid. So, like, you get. Let me see. You know what? I'm actually going to grab my iPad and actually pull those numbers up. So I'll be right back. Okay. So I'm going to start by going through the men's national team's contract. This is how the men's national team is paid. So they get paid $17.6 thousand per win. Well, $17,625 per win. They get paid a little over $8,000 for a tie and $5,000 for playing a loss. For the World Cup, they get $68,700 for or as a roster bonus for making the World Cup roster. They if they qualify for the World Cup, they get a $108,700 bonus, or $108,686 bonus. That's oddly specific. Some of these numbers are like legit, like oddly specific. And sorry, I'm having to like duck down and like get so close to read. Once again, blind guy. If they make the semifinals, they get a $244,000 plus bonus, and if they win the World Cup, they get $407,000 as a win bonus, which that's pretty cool. Of course, like that's never happening. So, you know, and I think we've never gotten to the semifinals. So you're looking at, for the World Cup, just, which of course you would, for wins and stuff, you have like the per game. Well, so those are actually like, that's payment for friendly wins, losses, and ties. So maybe they get that same that same pay for like any game, but it almost seems like they get that for the friendlies, and then if you make the World Cup roster, you get this bonus. Da da da. But basically, this is the structure. So, the thing that the women's national team is contending with is that they're upset because, well, this is their contract's payment structure for when they play games. So the women make $8,500 per friendly win, $1,750 for a tie, and they don't make any money for a loss, which they never lose. So, I mean, I say they rarely ever lose. So, which everyone, rightfully so, the first thought would be like, wait, they make like significantly less for their friendlies. We'll get to that. So for the World Cup, the women's team gets a roster bonus of $37,000 and a qualification bonus of $37.5. Now the men's team doesn't get this same qualification bonus. This is something different. Which, once again, so I mentioned a second ago that the men's and women's teams, I forgot, I kind of skipped past this, but the men's and women's teams were offered the same contracts back, when I was a child. And the men's team accepted it. The women's team chose to collectively bargain for a different deal because they wanted different things. Which Julie Foudy explained some of those things that they wanted on ESPN after a judge threw out their equal pay dispute last spring. I believe it was just last spring. I don't think it was 2 years ago. I think it was last spring. So much has happened in the last year that it's hard to remember what was a year ago and what was 2 years ago, because everything feels like it's been 3 years ago. So they get this $37,500 qualification bonus. So their roster bonus ends up being actually more than the men's team, which there's also less competition to compete to get into the World Cup for the women's team as well. Which this is the other thing, is level of competition, yada yada yada. Like, at this point, the men's contract, yes, they have. So actually, I'll get into that analysis here in a second. So the women's team, though, like the men, they don't, or for qualifying, like actually qualifying, they don't. The women's team doesn't get a bonus. They don't get a semifinal bonus. If they win the World Cup, they get $110,000. They get $50,000 for second place and $25,000 for third place. Which the men don't get a second or third place bonus. The thing that the women's team looks at or has been using as this inequality thing is, if the men, qualify, they get this $100,000 bonus. If they make the semifinals, they get like $245,000. If they win, they get $407,000. Whereas the women's team only gets $110,000 for winning. Here's the problem: the men's team never wins, and they never get close. They never make the semifinals. We're lucky if it's like, I think we've made the quarterfinals once. The women's team wins the World Cup basically every time it happens. Also, part of the reason those money, and we'll get into why the money for those things is different, is because the Women's World Cup doesn't make anywhere near the amount of money of the Men's World Cup. The payouts to the teams during the Men's World Cup are so much more substantial. That's what they're getting paid off of. Because, like, these are payments per player, by the way, not the team as a whole. Like, each player gets this amount of money. So, but just off that, you could say, okay, well, there's a case that there's inequality if you don't factor in the outside factors of, like, well, what's generating income. Because one of the arguments is, well, over the last, like, 5 years or whatever, or so many years, the women's team has actually made more money than the men's national team. Which is partially true because the men's team has been, well, they've underachieved, and players like Josie Altidore, when confronted or when criticized, chirped back like little babies and called themselves heroes to young kings, and that, people don't get free takes. He was going after Taylor Twellman, former U.S. men's player who didn't have as prolific a career as Josie, but at the same time, you strive for excellence. And we didn't even qualify for the Olympics this year. And Josie Altidore is a big reason for that. And so, well, not just Josie, but Twellman criticized players, including Josie Altidore. And Josie went on social media and had this really pathetic-looking tirade. I say tirade, talking himself up, naming himself a hero to young kings, basically young people of color. And that, and basically the idea is he's above criticism because of his skin color. Which is stupid. But anyway, like, that's kind of stuff is the reason the men's national team isn't successful, because, well, we have players who are entitled, they feel like they are amazing, and they're not as good as people from, or as players from other nations. They're much better players for those same people he says he's a hero for. They should maybe be looking up to some of the actual elite players from countries that are better than us, that play soccer better than us. But anyway, so we're going to get past the. So we've shown that there is a discrepancy in pay between the men's and women's team, theoretically, if the men's team were to theoretically actually be successful in a World Cup. So they've been, and this is the big number, is if the women, when the women win, they get $110,000. If the men were to win, they'd get $407,000, which is ridiculous. Because of the discrepancy, because it's the same thing. It's not the same event. See, unlike other nations, we actually put as much into the resources for the women's national team. Our women's national team is so much better funded and taken care of than other countries' women's teams that it's sad. Those countries spend way more on the men's game compared to the women. And we dominate. Our men's team doesn't. Which it also doesn't help that, like in America, our top athletes go into football, basketball, soccer, hockey. Because I want to say, like, yes, soccer is technically more played than hockey in the United States. However, the U.S. has amazing hockey players, and they get compensated better than like MLS players. So, and soccer's on the rise in this country, but it's nowhere near like a top sport here. Still, or like it's nowhere near like the best of the best for us are consistently choosing soccer. They're not. Anyway, so we're going to get into, this is where the women's national team, though, should be in hot water. But it's not being reported anywhere widely because the media narrative is these poor women aren't getting paid fairly. Well, I'm going to list off the benefits that they get that the men do not get. and what they're worth. And you tell me if they're being less compensated or not. So, I'm going to have to enlarge this so I can read it, because there's so many benefits on this graphic that it's too small for me to read without enlarging it. So, benefit number one that the women's team gets that the men's team does not. So the men's team doesn't get a base salary. They only get paid for games or for making the World Cup roster. So the base salary for the women's team, the top 20 players get a base salary of $100,000. So you make they have like a 31 person like roster. The next 11 players, who I think all have to come from the National Women's Soccer League here in the United States, they get base salaries of $62,000 to $67,000. They also get a one-time signing bonus. So when you get your first call-up, I'm assuming this is you get your first call-up for the women's national team, you get $230,000 just for making the women's national team for the first time. Is the way that I read that. You get a ticket revenue share of $1.50 per ticket, and you get $5,000 bonuses for oh wait, sorry. Per ticket. Let me make sure I'm okay. There's a weird bleed over there. So that's 4. You get a ticket. So you get $1.50 for every ticket sold in an event. Which here's the fun part. If my math is correct, that would mean for pretty much any women's national team event, they have negative ticket revenue. But I might be wrong there. Fifth, so that was the 4th. The 5th bonus or benefit they get that the men's national team doesn't get. A $5,000 bonus for first place at the She Believes tournament and the Four Nations tournament. Except I thought it was that he had or I thought it was a bigger bonus than that. I might want to check to make sure that this graphic doesn't have a typo. But still, it's like, because I thought it was $50,000 bonuses. But still, $5,000 bonuses for winning these tournaments. There's no, like, stipulated benefit for, say, the men winning. Well, I would need to look into it. But in this information, there's no stipulated benefit for them winning, like, the Gold Cup. They get severance benefits. They have injury protection, health insurance, dental insurance. None of the men's players or none of the men's national team contracts have that. They have vision insurance. They get pregnancy pay, guaranteed rest time, which means they're guaranteed rotating out, which means other people are guaranteed to get rotated in. Child care assistance. They get partnership bonuses tied to increased viewership. So basically, the more people watch their games, like the bigger numbers they draw on different streams, whatever, they get paid bonuses for that. The men's team doesn't get that. They get a annual payment use. Oh, then they get their player likeness payments. So, like, every year, because they get paid by the women's by U.S. Soccer for the use of their likenesses. Now, the men's team might get that, but usually those come from their professional teams. So I'll finish this off, then I'll get into explaining these benefits and what is interesting. 16, they get a good faith efforts minimum number of games. So they're guaranteed to play a certain number of games, which means they're guaranteed to get a certain number of bonuses for winning games because they practically win all their games. Well, and it's a good faith minimum number of games, I think, not just for the team as a whole, but for the specific player. And then they get $250,000 to $350,000 for an optional. They get to opt in or out of a post World Cup tour, which you're going to opt into $250,000 to $350,000. So they're sitting here saying, well, we don't get paid the same as the men for the World Cup. They win, they get $110,000, then they get this post-World Cup tour that they go on that they get paid $250,000 to $350,000 for. Which, if you're, doing the math, that's $360,000 to $460,000 worth of payments that they're basically guaranteed every 4 years that the men never get. Even though, they have the ability to get it, they never get there. So, which the men don't have that World Cup tour thing because they don't have the ability to do that because of their professional teams. So, the argument, though, is, well, this is why the women's national team made this collective bargaining agreement in the past. Per Julie Foudy, well, the men's players have professional contracts that provide them with all these benefits that they don't need to have in their U.S. soccer contracts, which, okay, that's fine. But that doesn't help you at the end of the day because you are getting these benefits. And therefore, for, as you say, doing the same job, you're getting more benefits that add up to these benefits add up so astronomical for the women's team. They are getting paid significantly more than the men's team for the same job, which they continually go back to the argument, well, our professional contracts don't offer us the same payments and benefits, and it's like, that's fine. That's cool. Well, how about you take that up with your professional team? Oh, that's not going to go anywhere, though. It's people trying to fight for... It's people trying to act like they're fighting for some injustice when in reality, they're actually getting compensated really well. And remember, these women, especially like Rapinoe, because not only do they have their own player likeness stuff for the U.S., they have sponsorship deals. They're getting paid tons in sponsorship deals. These are multimillionaires complaining about not getting or not having the same six-figure deal for one specific thing that the other person never ever achieves, so they never ever get that money. Whereas you're guaranteed it because you are better than everyone else in the world. You're better funded than everyone else in the world. And you're guaranteed that money because you do win the World Cup basically every year. Well, not every year, but every 4 years. And the idea that it's the same job is ludicrous anyway. But we're just looking at the money here. We're not getting into all the things that make women's and men's soccer different. We're just talking about the actual contracts. if the women are upset about inequality, then they should be also going to U.S. Soccer and saying that the men's team deserves all the same benefits that the women's team gets. But they don't. Which, as Julie Foudy said, they don't need it because they get it from their professional contracts. So then it comes down to, well, then why don't you get it from your professional contracts? It just seems unequal that way. But they don't want to get into it. But if they did that, it would come down to a business discussion because no one cares. No one watches women's professional soccer. I don't know a single person who does. I don't know where you would find it. I just recently learned that there was in the past few years that there was a women's Premier League. I had no idea. I had no idea that my favorite soccer club, Manchester City, had a professional women's team that was affiliated with it. I didn't know. That's why they don't get professional benefits. The U.S. Women's Soccer League, if I'm not mistaken, has to be basically subsidized to even run. I don't know if it's like the WNBA and the WNBA is subsidized by the NBA. I don't know if it's subsidized by MLS or whatever, but from what I understand, the National Women's Soccer League loses money every year. Most of these women, or a lot of these women's sports leagues, most of them lose money. But of course, most women's athletes around the world don't act like they're getting underpaid because of sexism. They understand they're getting paid less than the men because less people are watching them and there's less money involved. You don't get paid without revenue. Or at least you shouldn't. So basically what's happening here is the women's team wants, the best way I can put it is, imagine you have the men's team and they've got 2 pallets of money. The women's team have a pallet of money, and then they have this giant benefits package that's worth at least a pallet, if not multiple pallets of money. And they're complaining that they don't have the same number of pallets of money that the men's team do as part of their deal. That's what they're wanting. They're wanting all the benefits and they want to keep all of their own benefits, because this is the argument for U.S. Soccer. It's like, well, we offered you this same deal and you didn't want it because it didn't have these other things. And the big thing is this started right after the last World Cup cycle. And what ended up happening in 2017 is there was a new collective bargaining agreement struck that improved benefits and pay for the women's national team. And people like Megan Rapinoe publicly all over the place said this is a huge win, and while there's still progress to be made, this is a huge win. Huge win. Very Trumpian language. And then they, in 2019, on National Women's Day, filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation for gender discrimination. And I want to say it was like less than 2 years, because like 2017, 2019, but I want to say the deal was struck like in the summer or fall of 2017, and this lawsuit was brought in March 2019 and was shot down last year. And rightfully so. If we look at the data we just saw, there is unequal compensation, but it's by design by the women's national team. They chose to eschew this pay-to-play format, and they're trying to use the fact that outside factors that have nothing to do with U.S. soccer as to why they deserve, or why they deserve the benefits and to get the same pay as the men. Because if U.S. soccer is not having to pay all these benefits to the men's players, they can afford to pay them just more cash. And there's still, like, U.S. men's soccer, because this is the problem with also the way that the women's national team phrases, like, well, we make more money, we bring in more revenue than the men's team, which I believe it's like slightly. And it also depends because they use specific years, because they don't always put like the big tournaments the same years or whatever. Like the men's World Cup and the women's World Cup are different years. Although the women's World Cup does come up against, like, say, the Gold Cup, but that's not as big of a tournament. And yet it's still watched more than the women's World Cup. And like the biggest people in like the Gold Cup are like, well, the US and Mexico usually. That's it. No Brazil, no France, Germany, Spain, Argentina. But anyway. And I don't want people to confuse this as me bashing like women's sports or like women's athletes in general. Women's sports are great. I grew up watching women's college basketball. I actually feel like women's college basketball is a great product. It's a much better product than the WNBA even. Honestly. And women's tennis, like, tennis is great. Like, Serena Williams is one of the biggest athletes in modern sports history. She's one of the most successful athletes on planet Earth. And even she has said in interviews that women's and men's tennis are practically different sports. They're different games because, and this is what she did on a late night show interview. She said, well, they're bigger, they're stronger, and they serve harder. Like women's and men's soccer are different sports. And here I'll get into a little bit of like that topic. Because even beyond like the pay, you're saying that you're doing the same job, the same exact job. You're not. Because you're not having to go up against elite male athletes. Because you can't. The women's national team scrimmaged with the, like, under 15s team. These are 14, 15, maybe a 13-year-old made the team, but usually like 14 to 15-year-old boys. And they got hammered. They lost by multiple goals. Now, you could say, well, it was an exhibition. Still, these are teenage boys taking on the best. These are teenage boys in not even one of the 10 best soccer nations on the planet, taking on the best women's team on Earth and skunking them. It's not the same job. Because the men's national team would torch the 15-year-old men's national team. The under 15 men's team. That's just how it is. So I think that's a dumb argument that it's the same thing. It's why in combat sports you don't have men fighting women. And no, professional wrestling does not count because it's sports entertainment. It is not actual sport. It's not an actual combat sport. And you might be able to find some promotions that let it happen, like over in Japan or whatever, but typically it's... Let's just not get into it. There's a reason, like, the UFC and the major fighting, like, championships and promotions, there's not intergender competition, because it would be awful. Like, it would not be a fair fight. So, this is to say, like, if the women's team can collectively bargain for what they want, that's cool. I don't care if they get paid more than the men's team. But they're not getting paid differently because of sexism. They're getting paid differently because it's what they asked for and what they've agreed to. That's where I have a problem with that whole situation. And I think I've spent plenty of time on that topic. But I thought Nate the lawyer did a really good job. And also, Megan Rapinoe made a big stink about Draymond Green and some tweets he made. Although, I think his tweets are a little misguided as well. Because, like, he kind of basically said, well, like, y'all should have been fighting harder for change anyway. Or basically, it was almost like a fight between progressives. Like, about not being progressive enough or not being or doing enough. And it's like, I think Draymond is also a little stupid with some of his like activism stuff. Like acting like NBA players are like mistreated or something at different times. It's like you're getting paid tens of millions, or like in his case now, I think he, like, by the end of this contract he'll have made close to, if not over, $100 million just from playing basketball, not even including sponsorships and things of that nature. It's just crazy. Which, don't put that as me being in that camp of like, these guys get paid too much money to play sports. I'm like, it's market economics. If owners are willing to pay it, and if they're able to get it, they should get it. There's so much money involved. Well, who's supposed to get the money? Are the owners who don't? I mean, who? Yes, they invest. They're taking risk. What financial risk? There is no financial risk with the NFL. There hasn't been for a long time. The profitability of the sport, yes, they did drop during COVID, but I'm telling you, with the new TV deal they've got, the TV deals that they've agreed to that are going to kick in, and when people get back in the stadiums and just everything, revenues are about to skyrocket again. They're going to keep skyrocketing because they're finding more and more ways to bring in new money to the sport, as other country, like, as the world develops, more and more places are getting access to the sport and to access to the NFL and broadcasts and stuff, which is bringing in new revenue streams. So this money is going to continue to grow, and the owners shouldn't get to keep all of it. If anything, like, most of the professional sports leagues almost act as socialism for the owners. Or basically it was like a controlled economy, should I say, that absolutely benefits the owners. So, like, they make massive profits off of this. And the players do too. So, and the reason I started to say that is I am very pro player in the, like, the CBA negotiations. I have a problem when people complain about contracts that they've agreed to. You signed it, you live with it, you deal with it. If you don't like it, don't sign it. If you don't like it, don't be involved. That's what annoys me. That's what bothers me. Like, you don't get to, like, sign something, agree to it. And it's one thing, like, these people aren't being held at gunpoint to do this either. That's the thing. And they can act like they are or not. It's like, guess what? If you don't like it, you can walk away. Oh, but you haven't built the skills to, like, go and walk and do another job? Okay, well then sign the contract. I mean, just because you can't just walk away and make millions of dollars doing something else doesn't mean you're entitled to, like, whatever else you want. You have to negotiate it. And it's not like people are breaking any laws. Like, people are trying to use these discrimination laws as means to just to do better for themselves. Like, to me, like, the women's national team is trying to exploit the current socio-political climate and things to get more for themselves. And that's dishonest. Like, they're using people who will not do the research or will just ignore facts because, yeah, but they said so. So, but I'm done with that. I'm going to jump into my draft primer because I'm starting this a little later than I wanted. So yeah, so I got my picks article up. So, the Denver Broncos, we're going to start. So, we're doing the AFC West today. We're going to start with Denver because they've got the earliest pick. We're going to go in order: Denver, San Diego, Oakland, Kansas City. So, Denver right now, they're picking number 9. Uh-oh. Okay, that was just some tea that was in my mustache. I was like, uh-oh, is my nose bleeding again? But that was the opposite side. So, anyway, they're picking at number 9. The first question for Denver is, are we going to give Drew Lock another year? We didn't let him start until late in his rookie season, and that was kind of up and down. There were bright spots. There were, growing pains. Last year, he got hurt for a bit. All of his top 2 receiving weapons missed a lot of time. Courtland Sutton had a seasoning injury. Noah Fant missed a lot of time. I think Jerry Jeudy was out with some little injury for a bit. And Jeudy and KJ Hamler were rookies. Do we give him another season here? Or do we try and draft a quarterback? I think it's possible right now that one of Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones could be available at 9. Mac Jones doesn't profile as a John Elway quarterback. So then you're thinking Lance, Fields. Do they move up? Do they try and move up and get a quarterback? I think that Elway is still very much on the Drew Lock train. I think Drew Lock is probably safe. So with that being said, they have some really good weapons for this year. You've got Cameron Sutton. You have Noah Fant, who last year, especially early in the season, he looked like he was going to develop, or he was developing into a top-level tight end. I think he is going to be. Or top-end receiving tight end. Cameron Sutton is a great downfield contested catch, between the numbers receiver. He was in 2019, he was arguably the best receiver the whole season on deep post routes. He's really good on digs. Great contested catch receiver. Can play to the sideline, down the field. I like Courtland Sutton. I like Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy was my number 2 receiver behind Justin Jefferson last year. He can do everything. KJ Hamler is a burner out of the slot. Great complimentary receiver. They have weapons. So, and I like Drew Lock. He was my number 2 quarterback in the 2019 class. I didn't know. I was okay with the right team maybe draft him in the first round. I thought he was really great value in the second round. Kyler Murray was my only. I thought he was a surefire prospect. I didn't like Dwayne Haskins. Didn't like Daniel Jones. You could say so far Daniel Jones has been better. Well, Daniel Jones has had more opportunities. And has had and yes, some guys have gotten hurt at different points, but Daniel Jones had more opportunities to showcase his talent, and in an easier division over the last 2 years than Drew Lock has. So we'll see. I say you give Lock a shot this year, and that leaves you, what do you do at number 9? So Grant Bowles had the best season of his career last year. Looks like he's locked in at left tackle. Jawan James opted out, and I believe he'll be back this year. And he's a quality right tackle. You've got Dalton Risner inside. So I don't think I'd go offensive tackle here, personally. Which, to me, leaves it defense. So, for a lot of times, this was like corner. The first corner was going to go off the board here. It was going to be Surtain or Farley. Farley's had that minor back procedure done, which seems to have not necessarily thrown like a huge red flag up, but I think it's attached a small yellow flag to him, and he might drop. He might be the number 3 corner off the board now. I think J.C. Horn has probably jumped him for a lot of teams now. I know Surtain is now squarely the number 1 corner, and I think Surtain is perfect for the Broncos. I think Horn's great for the Broncos too, but I think Surtain's perfect. But they did sign. Sorry. They do have a corner they drafted last year that they like. They signed. Oh man, how am I blanking on the corners they signed? They did sign Ronald Darby and Kyle Fuller. So I actually don't think they're going to draft corner with their first pick. This, to me, this is a perfect spot for a perfect Vic Fangio linebacker. Micah Parsons, I think the Broncos should run to the podium and draft Parsons at 9. He has moved after his pro day. As much as I like Joker's tape and as much as I like Jamin Davis, like Parsons is squarely my number 1 linebacker again. His physical tools are just ridiculous. And he was just dominant in 2019. His last game of his college career, he was just he had the best game of his career. So I would, and he can do everything. Like, this is a guy you could have him rush the passer off the edge if you wanted. This is a guy who, like, elite blitzer. He has amazing range and speed. Like, he can improve in coverage, but he is a solid coverage player. Great against the run. This guy is a weapon. And this guy should be the perfect type of player as to match up with elite tight ends that you're trying to stop because of his speed, strength, size, change of direction at that speed and strength. I think he's the pick at number 9. So then you go to round 2, the 40th pick. This maybe would be a good spot to go corner. Elijah Molden, Kelvin Joseph, maybe Asante Samuel Jr. is available. I think all those guys. Asante Samuel Jr. would be a really good fit because he could play outside, but you could start him off in the slot with Kyle Fuller. I hate that I can't remember the corner they drafted last year. I believe he was out of Iowa. I think his last name started with an O. And Ronald Darby. Those guys kind of rotating on the outside with a Samuel Jr. at slot, or maybe you run him and Fuller some at slot, but you rotate those guys. I think Asante Samuel would be a great fit. But if you're wanting to look for a guy who can play like outside or play both, like Elijah Molden would be a really good fit. Kelvin Joseph's a nice physical corner too. He would fit the Fangio like outside corner type mold that he really likes. But I really would like, which I think Asante Samuel's first round pick. Personally, like, I have a first round grade on him, but I think he's going to go in that early second round range based on what I'm seeing. But would not be shocked if he went in the first. Round 3, well, another option at round 2. Like I said, if they did go corner with 9th overall, Nick Bolton might be available at 40 as a linebacker. Maybe Zaven Collins, although I think Collins is more of a 4-3 strong or a 3-4 outside linebacker than a 3-4 middle, which is what they need. Like if they someone to go next to Alexander Johnson at middle linebacker. Like Johnson's so smart, he can, and this is the great part about the fit with Denver. Parsons wouldn't have to worry about calling a defense because you've got Alexander Johnson there. And Johnson's a strong, smart, heady player. He calls your defense, and he allows you to use Parsons as just a weapon. And I think that's why Parsons is such a good fit at 9. I talked about Asante Samuel as corner in round 2. Another round 2 option, maybe this is where maybe you go offensive line. You get a guy like maybe Trey Smith out of Tennessee who started off as a tackle, moved inside to guard. Maybe he could play right tackle at the next level, but he would help your interior and then maybe replace Jawan James in the future. Maybe you draft a tackle like I keep mentioning Jalen Mayfield, Liam Eichenberg, Sam Cosmi, Dylan Radins, in this range. Maybe no, I don't think they need a center necessarily. So I don't think they need a center. Well, they drafted Lloyd Cushenberry last year, yeah, so they're good. He just needs to develop. Another option in round 2 is you've got Freeman and Gordon there, but you lost Philip Lindsay. Maybe round 2, you target like a speedier back. Maybe ETN falls to round 2. He'd be a really good fit, but I don't think they're going to go running back that early. Not this year. Maybe they target a pass rusher because, Bradley Chubb's great, but coming off an injury. Von Miller is, I think, 32 and entering the last year of his contract. So I would say at some point they need to draft like a pass rusher to develop, but maybe you do that in round 3. If you're going round 2, like in that range, Jason Owe would be an elite athlete that you could bring along as a rotation player. And his speed will be disruptive. It was, even though he didn't have sacks last year at Penn State, he was disruptive and disruptive in the run game. I don't think he's necessarily he's not as good as Marquez Sweat was coming out, like in terms of polish. Like Sweat's actually like a great run defender, and with pass rush upside, and he was a good pass rusher at Mississippi State, but he had ways he could improve. Owe would be very interesting at 40, getting to, be in the same room with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb under Vic Fangio. I think Owe would be a good value at 40. In that case, like if Zaven Collins were to slip out of round 1 and was available at 40 somehow, which that's actually possible, I say somehow, he would be a good fit as a 3-4 outside linebacker in that he can rush the passer. He's got good size. He's 6'4", 260. But he has pass rushing chops. He's great in coverage. So I could see him being a good fit for Denver. A couple other guys, Joseph Asai of Texas. Dude had 20 tackles for loss last year. That's insane. Like 20 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. That guy is brutally strong, and I really, really like him. I'd be super happy to see him on my Titans. I'd love to have him. Azeez Ojulari of Georgia would be good too. But, man, I'm seeing some people Mike Tannenbaum, former personnel executive, specifically with the Jets and Dolphins, he had Azeez Ojulari going to the Giants at 11, his first pass rusher off the board. Some people are that high on him as he's a pure speed rusher. And he was really good at Georgia. It's like I could understand people draft him at the end of the first round, but I've got him more in the second round. Like, I prefer Osai. I prefer other people. That doesn't mean that I don't like Ojulari. But I just feel like you better have some strong guys, which Denver does. Bradley Chubb's a powerful guy. They've got a lot of powerful interior guys like Shelby Harris, the criminally underrated Shelby Harris. So he'd be a good fit in round 2 for him. But I don't see Ojulari as like a top 20 prospect. Like, and I don't have him like, he's not even in my top 32. But he's good enough to where I could see like some teams Ojulari is a tough one for me. He's kind of like a borderline first, second for me. He's a late first, early second round kind of value for me. But he might not be available by 40. So, round 3, like I said, so I've got if I was Denver, Parsons at 9, a corner at 40 like Elijah Molden, Asante Samuel Jr., Kelvin Joseph, and then at 31 in round 3, pick 71. That's a spot where I think would be a more serious potential for like a running back to get drafted, but I think they'll wait till even later. And I would. I mean, Royce Freeman's a former 3rd round pick, I believe. You've got Melvin Gordon, who you're paying. And there is some decent or depth at the running back position, particularly like kind of quicker pass catching type guys. Although, now that I say that, Demetric Felton at 71 would be a really, really good pick because he gives you versatility as a slot, he played running back in college, but he looks like he could be an elite slot player at the NFL level. But you do have a lot of weapons on offense. Not that you can't always use more, but I think the Broncos should probably be focusing heavily on defense in this draft. Because if Locke pops, that offense has the talent, should have the talent to really go. So you've got your weapon as an off-ball linebacker. Well, your chess piece in Micah Parsons. You've got, let's say Elijah Molden at corner for the Broncos at 40. Pick 71. This would be another good time to maybe hit pass rush. This is maybe Patrick Jones II. Maybe Joe Trine's still on the board here. There's so many like guys in that 2nd and 3rd round range. There are guys who could rise and fall. I think Cam Sample would be a good fit for Fangio. Another possibility is you beef up your defensive interior at 71. And that's another thing in round 2. Maybe they another guy who could potentially go at 40 to the Broncos. Christian Barmore would be an interesting choice there, in my opinion. Christian Barmore or a Levi Ozurike. Man, I know I just butchered his name. Maybe it's on Wuzurike. But 71, interior guy. Maybe maybe Davian Nixon's available from Iowa. I think he's probably off the board. Jay Tulafele would probably be a good guy during this region. In this region, maybe you go nose. Maybe you get a guy like Tyler Shelvin at 71. I'd love that pick at 71 for any team that's running like Vic Fangio's style defense. Powerful, like nose tackle type. But if you're going for like developmental pass rusher, round 3, Cam Sample's on the board, you go for him, or Joe Tryon. I think both those guys would be really good fits there. Patrick Jones is second, more of a long kind of bendy kind of rusher. Tryon and Sample are more powerful. I think Tryon's a little quicker than Sample. Sample, which I'd love. Sample to me looks exactly like you would expect a Ravens, like the prototypical Ravens outside linebacker to be. That's my fit for him. And then round four would probably be a good place to maybe get wide receiver depth now. So like your Dwayne Eskridge, Tutu Atwell is going to be off the board, but I keep saying like I think he's more of a fourth round guy, late third, fourth round guy, because he came in slower than we expected. And they have a bunch of 7th round picks. Well, I say a bunch. They've got 3 7th round picks. I'd say like rounds 4 and 5, or day 3. The things the Broncos should probably be targeting on day 3, safety, or like safety depth. Probably a 7th round flyer on some like athletic corner that's left. Like I said, receiver depth, running back depth. Some guys kind of who should be available on day 3. Jarrett Patterson of Buffalo, although we don't really know what his receiving chops are. Puka Williams of Kansas. Probably should take a lineman at some point, and probably an offensive tackle at some point. Round 4 might be a good spot for, a guy who, which there's this guy from Cincinnati, Hudson, I think is his last name, that a lot of people are high on. I'm not as high on. I think he's like a 4th round, maybe 5th round guy. He might have to kick into guard, but he might be an interesting prospect in that range. You have I'm blanking on his name. Offensive tackle from Duke. I've got a 3rd, 4th round grade on him. He'd be interesting to target in the 4th round. Trying to think of some of the like interior guys that could be available right now, or like in through here. But I would say offensive line depth, probably in rounds like 4, 5, 6, picking a lineman somewhere in there, and maybe with one of your 7ths. But Denver needs to focus on the defense, and their first 3 picks, I think, should all be defense. Unless they just get some ridiculous value where, like, not maybe considering, like, a Najee Harris or Travis Etienne in round 2 if they're available at 40, or maybe considering, like, if Liam Eichenberg or Jalen Mayfield are available at pick 40, maybe consider it. Maybe consider Dylan Radins there. Like, but I think they should just go. I think they should be going, if he's available, Micah Parsons at 9, corner at 40, and then either or some kind of pass rusher, interior or exterior at 71, or maybe Tyler Shelvin, nose tackle. So, with that being said, we're going to move on to my boys Hayden and Jalen. They're Los Angeles Chargers. They're big Chargers guys. Well, scrolling there, kind of not getting it perfect. Oh, gosh darn it. Where's the arrow? I want to get everything centered correctly. Nope, not that one. Actually, that worked though. Okay. So for the Chargers, so they're picking at 13. I've had offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw here for a while. There seems to be some belief that maybe only one or maybe only Penei Sewell goes in the top 10. And I've seen some mocks where they have Penei Sewell even dropping out of the top 10 because of teams prioritizing like playmakers and then people moving up for quarterbacks, stuff like that. I don't see that happening. I think Sewell is going to go at 5 or 6. I just have a feeling. Although personally, I think if I'm the Dolphins, I'm taking a wide receiver. I'm getting like a top tier playmaker for Tua, which will move Devontae Parker to what I think is a much better like role for him, which is a downfield contested catch, kind of like number 2 type, where he's not the focal point. And they have Will Fuller to be like just this speed demon, field stretcher kind of player. You get Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, or Devontae Smith. And I think, honestly, as much as I like the idea of like Waddle and even more so Smith's like chemistry with Tua, Chase is really hard to pass up. And I see why a lot of people have him ranked number 1. Like after he ran that 4.34 40, I think is what it was. I mean, or 4.35. The guy's built like a bigger Steve Smith. I mean, he's 6 foot and like 3/8, 6 foot and 5/8. I think it's 6 foot 3/8 of an inch, 201 pounds. I mean, he's strongly built. He's got an explosive vertical. I think it was like a 41.5-inch vertical. I think it was like an 11.1 broad jump. I mean, it was a ridiculous like 11 plus foot broad jump. His 3-cone was okay, or like it wasn't like spectacular, but it was good. Like or actually, if I'm remembering correctly, maybe his 3-cone was good and his shuttle was bad, or was like merely average at the position. One of either his 3-cone or his short shuttle were like 48th percentile, but everything else was like 95 or 90, 95 percentile and above. Like in terms of testing numbers, like Chase is a heck of an athlete. He's a physical receiver. He'll block like crazy, and I think you could put him in sets where you run him out even as a slot in between Fuller and Parker, and with Gesicki out there. You could line him up outside. But he has elite catch and run traits. He's physical after the catch. He's fast. He plants his foot and he just gets. He's hard to tackle. You get Devontae Parker and Will Fuller running deep, and maybe run like Gesicki on some kind of clear out like corner, or you send him downfield and you just clear out for Chase underneath. Man, that's dangerous. You run like combinations that get Chase on like a crossing route going the opposite way. Something like what Alabama like to do a lot. Well, LSU like to use crossers with Jefferson and him, but I'm thinking of like Alabama, the way they would move people around and get them, or they'd run concepts that would have the entire play running one way, but have another receiver like Smith or Billingsley or Waddle like coming back across, or like ending up crossing back across the formation and ending up open. Miami with Chase would be able to do that, and they could do that with Smith or Waddle too. Oh no, I'm out of tea. But sorry, I've gotten off on Miami. That was my bad. But anyway, I just think Miami's going to go receiver, and they should go receiver, pass catcher, whatever, and draft a tackle at 18. Because there will be value at tackle at 18. And then you take, like the Bengals, I think the Bengals are probably going to go Sewell rather than draft a receiver. Because, like, and Burrow seems like he really wants Jamar Chase there in Cincy. And I think that would be a great fit. And Cincinnati would still be able to get a really good offensive tackle probably at 38. But they draft Sewell. They move Jonah Williams over to right tackle. Both their tackle spots should be or would be solid. And considering Burrow's coming off a torn ACL, you need to protect him. They've got to go offensive tackle at 5, as much as I would love to see him and Chase together. So the Dolphins should, at that point, the Chargers. The Chargers should be looking at, guarantee that Darrisaw's there, I would say. I mean, there are no guarantees in the draft, but it's possible that Rashawn Slater's even there, depending on how things play out, which would be great for them too. And there's a lot of Chargers fans that would kind of like to see the Chargers move up to make sure they got a really good offensive tackle. My buddy Hayden included, and he hates trading up. So I'm going to say that at 13, though, I still think Slater's so good it'd be hard for him to be there. But I'm going to say Darrisaw is who I have there. But if Slater's available, they should take Slater. But I think it will be an offensive tackle at 13. Or at least it should be. Even in a deep class like this, you've got to protect Herbert. You've got to improve that offensive line. They have weapons there, and this is a deep draft for receivers. And speedy receivers, particularly what they need, they can get those later. Which, speaking of that, so you've got your left tackle at 13. At 47, this is where you get a speed demon receiver. So, in that vein, there are several guys who are in that late first to second round range. You've got Rondale Moore. I'm going to say at this point, Kadarius Toney's going to be off the board. I think he goes first round. Rondale and Elijah Moore are very interesting. Because I could see, I think these players definitely have, traits where it's yeah, I could see these guys going first round. I could see Rondale Moore going as high as, the middle of the first round. And if Elijah Moore went that high, it wouldn't necessarily shock me. But Rondale did measure in at 5'7". I think that's going to turn some people off. Even as explosive as he is, I said Jamar Chase is kind of like a bigger Steve Smith. And Chase, another comp, and I like this one too because I've used this one too, is a more athletic, a faster Anquan Bolden. I think also tracks really well. And not just a faster Anquan Bolden, if Anquan Bolden had elite field flipping speed, that's Jamar Chase. I think Rondale Moore really is like a Steve Smith type receiver. And he is powerful at his size. 5'7", 180 or 5'7", 185. I think he was 185 at his pro day. That's ridiculous. And he actually might have ended up a little bit bigger than that. But I'm going to say 5'7", 185. You run a 4.29 40, 42.5-inch vertical. Really good number of reps on the bench. He had a ridiculous broad jump too. It was 129 inches, something like that. I mean, and his other numbers were elite too. I would say if Rondale Moore is available at 47 or Elijah Moore is available at 47, I think the Chargers should take him. They're smaller guys, but they've got a big contested catch guy, Mike Williams. They've got Keenan Allen, who's elite route runner, physical type guy, well, an Anquan Bolden type guy, except maybe a little less physical than Bolden, but also way like more savvy as a route runner. Not that Bolden wasn't, but different leanings. But similar players. You add guys like or one of those two guys to your receiving core. I mean, if both of those guys are off the board, which is very possible they are, uh, Jalen Darden out of North Texas might be an option, but I still think that's a little early for him. If none of Kadarius Toney, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore aren't on the board at 47, there might be a good time for the Chargers just to double down on offensive line, grab an interior lineman like Trey Smith or because they signed Corey Linsley at center, but you could draft Landon Dickerson and move him to guard and move Dickerson to guard because he's big dude. But Trey Smith or Quentin Miners would also be a good like interior lineman. Like I think he'd be a brutal guard. He's got some fun tape to watch. What little there is. He was really fun at the Senior Bowl. So that would be a potential option. Also, getting younger at corner would also be a good idea at 47. Maybe rather than getting the speedy receiver, because there's a bunch of speedy receivers, maybe you go corner at 47 once again. I keep mentioning these guys like in this range: Kelvin Joseph, Asante Samuel, Elijah Molden. Still might be a little rich for like Tyson Campbell or Eric Stokes. Although, man, I saw Tannenbaum had Eric Stokes in his first round. I thought that was way rich. Although he did bring some stats for Eric Stokes that I was not aware of. Eric Stokes had his completion percentage like into his coverage was ridiculously low. Like the QBR into his coverage was like 1.5. That's basically non-existent. So if Stokes is really that good, then Stokes should be a first-round pick, and probably would be good value at 47. So, but he does seem a little stiff. But you can't teach 4.26 speed, man. At over 6 feet, so almost 6'1". So let's say they go corner at 47 instead of receiver, and then you've got picks 77 and 97 in the third round for the Chargers. 77, if Jalen Darden's on the board, I say you just fling that pick in, or Anthony Schwartz. Anthony Schwartz isn't quite as skilled as a receiver yet, but like 4.26 speed, he'd be a real gadget type weapon. You could put him in the backfield some too. Demetric Felton, I'm going to keep saying his name a lot because Demetric Felton's one of my favorite players in the draft. If he's available at 77, that would probably be the best scenario, is that the Chargers could get Demetric Felton. This is a guy that they could use at running back or in the slot. I don't think he's as fast as Darden or Schwartz or whatever, but like he's super quick. He does have good top end speed, and he's got really good versatility. He and Austin Eckler could really screw with defenses because of their receiving abilities. Another option, Tutu Atwell would be a decent value, I guess, at 77 or 97, although he's so small. Like, he came in at 155 at his pro day and only ran a 4.42, and I think he was like barely 5'9". It might have been 5'8". He was 5'8" or 5'9". I just didn't like that, because you've got all these other like guys who are kind of like in that range, but their speed and their explosiveness tested way higher, and I don't like it. Dwayne Eskridge would be another interesting guy, maybe in the third round. Particularly if maybe around 97. Another thing that the Chargers definitely need to be looking at in this draft would be also their front seven. So we've gotten them an offensive tackle. We've gotten them a corner at 47. So 77, 97. I mean, I've listed a lot of names, but they also really need to improve their. They have Joey Bosa, but they could improve their defensive line in general, and with Melvin Ingram being gone, a pass rusher would probably be good. Patrick, like I mentioned for the Broncos in this range, Patrick Jones. Would probably be a good fit here. Give them some more quickness on the edge. Emerson Smith would be, if he's available at 77, would be a really strong pick. And he might even be available at 97. I don't know, but I'm pretty high on Emerson Smith. In terms of interior linemen, I mentioned Tyler Shelvin, Jay Tuafele. Tuafele's teammate at USC, who had a really hard name, Joe Togiai. I think it was Joseph Togiai, something Togiai from Ohio State would be a really strong pick in round 3 or 4. Those guys in that range. Round 4, like I said, maybe Togiai. Or maybe Bo Hanna out of Kentucky if you want a big nose tackle who could just really improve your run defense and just space eat. He'd be a really good value in round 4, maybe available in round 5. But I think a guy as big as Bo Hanna, who made such an impact at the SEC level, I don't see how you could not at least, or why you wouldn't snag that guy in the 4th round. And they have 2 6th round picks. This is kind of one of those where you get to rounds 4 or 5, 6, and 7. I'd say for the Chargers, maybe trying to find a scat or another not a scat back, but you try and get another running back to that rotation. Puka Williams would be really interesting there. If they wanted to get a bigger, stronger back, Stevenson out of Oklahoma would be a really interesting pick. Regis out of UL or the University of Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, would be a good pick, probably around round 6. Puka he might be available in round 5. Let's see. Yeah. But if the Chargers are going to try for a speedy receiver, I think rounds 2 through 4, there's some interesting options. Like I said, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, Anthony Schwartz. And honestly, with the Chargers' needs, this isn't a bad draft to necessarily trade down at different points because you have so many good offensive tackles. You don't have to go offensive tackle at 13. I would, especially if Slater or Darrisaw are there. But if there's just something weird happens and you end up with some early run on offensive tackle, someone moves up before you to get one, moving back and getting Jalen Mayfield, Liam Eichenberg, Dylan Radins, or moving back, drafting something else in round 1 and getting one of those guys at 47 wouldn't be the worst thing for the Chargers in picking up more picks. And what I might do in the future is specifically like once I've gotten done with my draft primers, kind of having some of my friends on to talk about different some different prospects for their teams. Particularly like having maybe find a way to have my buddies Hayden and Jalen on to talk about the Chargers, because that would be fun. From there, we're gonna kind of. Oh wait, they're up here because they're now the Las Vegas Raiders. So we're gonna hit the Raiders, and we're gonna blow through the Raiders. Who knows what they're gonna do, because they just make tons of questionable decisions. But I would say now they have a definite need at or along the interior line. I don't think that's necessarily something you take at 17. Although maybe you decide to move Marcus Cannon into right guard, so you take an offensive tackle at 17. Maybe a Darisaw if he slides a little bit. Although I wouldn't necessarily consider it totally a slide if he ended up at 17. Maybe you take a Tevin Jenkins. Maybe you're really high on Jalen Mayfield, which actually Mayfield kind of profiles as someone I think the Raiders would love. Although maybe that'd be a little bit of a value reach. Personally, though, the Raiders, even after the money they spent at linebacker, they probably could use an upgrade there. I think Joker, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, would be a great pick for them at 17, because he can also he actually played the majority of his snaps in the slot last year. But he did play, and then linebacker, and then he actually played some directly on the defensive front. He's a really versatile, interesting player. I think he'd be a great fit for the Raiders, because he would help them improve a number of things. Once again, in a way, slightly different from Micah Parsons, and a little more similar to like Isaiah Simmons last year. He's a chess piece type player. Well, think of him almost like a queen, someone that can morph and do and fill multiple roles, and that's what he's doing, or what he could provide to the Raiders. And that would simplify like Littleton's role and put him back in a role that's probably better suited for him anyway. Okay, that sneeze didn't hurt as much as the last one. But yeah, so I would say Koramoah, but the Raiders can go just about anywhere, honestly. And they really need and they honestly could use. I know they drafted Henry Ruggs first round last year, but they could use a bigger, more traditional style number one receiver, I think. But we shall see this year. Like I said, offensive line. Tevin Jenkins would also be an interesting pick, because there's some people who say like maybe he should slide inside or he could slide inside. But you take Jenkins at 17, which I know when I talked about the Dolphins, I'm like, Jenkins would be perfect for them at 18, and I'd like to see the Dolphins like draft Chase at 6, Chase or Smith at 6, and then go Jenkins at 18. But Jenkins would be a good fit with the Raiders. He could slide inside, or you could push Marcus Cannon inside to guard. At 48. And see, this is the crazy thing with the Raiders. They had so many weaknesses on defense, but they had the strength on the offensive line. They decided, let's nuke our interior offensive line, to the point where, like, well, now they need a center. Or like they need to improve the interior line, and it's like, it's just really stupid. It confounds me. As many pass rushers as they've drafted, they still need more pass rush. Although they did sign someone to help with that, but well, they signed Yannick Ngakoue, and I like Max Crosby a lot. But that basically puts Colin Farrell in kind of like a Michael Bennett type role. So, and I think Arden Key's still on the roster. So maybe they don't draft a pass rusher, at least not early. So, although really it shouldn't preclude them from. Sorry, I got like a ringing in my ear right now. I think maybe from that sneeze or something. But it's driving me nuts. But yeah, I'd say just go Joker at 17, at 48, despite, the guys they've drafted at corner. Think they still need a corner. So maybe you go corner in the second round again, like you did 2 years ago. Because they overdrafted Damon Arnett last year. And they could go corner at 17. Like, Oakland, it's hard to do a primer, but like, because they have so many needs, it's like, well, you could take them anywhere. So, if they were going to go corner at 17, you've got Caleb Farley or J.C. Horn right there. Maybe Greg Newsome. I really like Greg Newsome. At 48, like I said, I think they could use another receiver. Some people have like Rashad Bateman's got like a huge range, and Bateman could be a pick at 17, him or Terrace Marshall. But those guys, from what I've seen from other people, could seemingly be available at 48. Or maybe that's the high end of his range, but maybe a Diami Brown of North Carolina I really like. But I would say, really, I'm going to say Joker at 17. And then at 48, Kelvin Joseph of Kentucky would be a really good pick. Actually, I need to be thinking, though, about, like, what have they picked in the past? Like, what are they looking for? Which it seems like players who played on or played for elite programs in college. So, Joker would fit at 17. I'm thinking of like the playoff teams this year and like their players. Shaun Wade might be a guy they'd take at 48, and overrated senior from Ohio State. Kind of like Arnett last year, who to me was a second, maybe even third round corner who went in the first round. So Shaun Wade going 48 would probably make a lot of sense. And then they've got 79 and 80 in the third round. This could be a spot where they address like their defensive line with a Tyler Shelvin for more of a run stopping kind of guy. Once again, Jay Tuilofele, or you go with or you look at a guy who kind of profiles in that versatile kind of inside-outside rusher kind of defensive end in Rashad Weaver of Pittsburgh, who I really like. I haven't really mentioned him because I haven't really had... And actually, I should have mentioned him maybe with Denver and with San Diego in that range. Rashad Weaver would be a really nice pick for improving your pass rush. Rashad Weaver, I think, would be good value in the third. as would his teammate Patrick Jones II. You look at it's in the greatest safety draft. But round 3-4, Jamar Johnson. I've mentioned him out of Indiana. I really like him. Maybe Andre Cisco of Syracuse in that range, although I don't like him as much. But that's just because people have him are overrating him. But I'd say late third, or maybe you could get away with anywhere in the third. But I like him better, kind of like outside of the top. Like I'd love the value of him in like the fourth round if he's there. That would be like I say love. I'd like the value there. But I don't know if he'll be available at pick 121. And it's possible they could draft like a depth running back at some point. Although I would just, or behind Jacobs. But, well, no, they re-signed someone. Oh, no, they signed Kenyon Drake. They don't need to draft a running back. They've already got enough like value invested at that position right now. Too much so, actually. A day 3 receiver would probably be a good idea. Dwayne Eskridge, if he's available in round 4. He'd probably be gone by 121, though. Daz Newsome would be an interesting one. Nico Collins in round 3 or 4 would be pretty decent value, actually. Which, crazily enough, Tannenbaum had him, I think, in the first round of Titans. I don't think it was a 2-round mock draft. I think it was a 1-round mock draft, and he had Nico going to us in like round 1. I was like, what? I would need to look at Tannenbaum's mock again. I know he had him pretty high, or like going to us, and I think Nico could go in the second round. I don't think he's a first round prospect, but Nico he dropped some weight because he was playing at Michigan. He was playing at like 230, 6'4", 230. At the Senior Bowl, he had cut down to like 215, and he was way quicker and faster, but he didn't really lose that physicality. If you can get Nico at like 215, 220, not really losing a lot of strength, but like quicker, he kind of looks like a more physical Darius Slayton type receiver, and that could be interesting, and that would be a good number 2 for the Titans. Be a good new number 2 type, or complementary receiver for just about anyone. He'd be a great complement to Ruggs, so that would be a good pick for the Raiders in round 3. I think he'd be good value. But yeah, they got a couple 5ths and a 6th. I don't know, but the Raiders definitely need to address the offensive line or the interior offensive line, and I would suggest doing that either maybe in round 3, round 4, or actually they probably should be throwing multiple darts at the offense or at the offensive line. So, or between rounds 3 and 5 is what I would say. And then we're going to end this off with... I got to go up. We're going to end this off with the Kansas City Chiefs. Man, this is a long show today. I'm going way longer than I meant to. So, Kansas City picking at 31. They have significant needs, actually, for a team that just came off the Super Bowl because of the cap crunch. Because I really wanted to improve their defense. It would have been nice for them to be able to really focus on defense, but they're going to have to focus on offensive line, particularly offensive tackle. And I think at pick 31, this is where you're probably going to see one of that group of Jalen Mayfield, Liam Eichenberg, Dylan Radins, Sam Cosmi go. And solidify one of those offensive tackle spots. And then at 63, you could even see them draft another tackle or just offensive lineman in general. Some guys who could be available in this range, like Alex Leatherwood, Quentin Miners. Maybe Landon Dickerson drops because of injury concerns. Trey Smith could be available. Wyatt Davis out of Ohio State, the guard. I think their first 2 picks should probably be offensive line. If they do, which I think they're just going to go offensive tackle at 31. At 63, though, you could see corner. Tyson Campbell out of Georgia would be a really good value for them at corner. Maybe they go linebacker, try and improve that spot. Jabril Cox would be a pretty good option. It's in that range for them. But I would say they need to go offensive line or cornerback. At 94 in the 3rd round, this would be a really good spot for maybe Dwayne Eskridge of Western Michigan. He profiles in that he's small, good straight line speed. Like, this is a guy who can stretch the field horizontally or vertically. It's like he, Mecole Hardman, and Hiller and Tyreek Hill, all kind of in that same kind of prospect mold. But maybe Anthony Schwartz is available. He's faster and has a little more wiggle to him, although probably not as good as a receiver. And Schwartz with his speed and coming from Auburn might be gone by then. Tutu Atwell would also fit. But I think they kind of need a bigger kind of guy. If Seth Williams of Auburn's around at 94, he'd be a really good pick. Maybe Diami Brown's still on the board. He'd be a really good pick. He's got good speed. He's 6 foot. He's, downfield physical type receiver. One of the best contested catch receivers in college football the last couple years. I'd really like him in Kansas City. But they got to replace Sammy Watkins. All of a sudden. But yeah, so that's at 94. If they don't go receiver there, and Demetric Felton would be an interesting guy if he was available at 94, but I just don't see how he falls that far. I think he'll go early 3rd. Although some people have him like 3rd, 4th round. I'm like, if he falls out past like that 3rd round, I'd be shocked. 94 would be another good spot for them to go linebacker. So they go offensive line. First 2 picks are offensive line corner. Monty Rice out of Georgia would be a good value in the 3rd. It's possible Jabril Cox still around at 94. McGorn out of Michigan would be a good value at 94, I think. Round 4, late in round 4. Once again, Monty Rice seems to have a big range from different people I'm seeing. Monty Rice might be available at 136, 144. May even be available in the 5th round, although I wouldn't bet on that. So, and I wouldn't count on the Chiefs or discount the idea that the Chiefs might move around the board a little bit. Because they had 2 4ths and 2 5ths to kind of play around with. And even with this tackle class, they could move down with someone wanting to move up for someone specifically at 31 and move down a few picks in the 2nd round and still get a starting caliber offensive tackle. So, and that would allow them to pick up more picks, which would be beneficial to them as well. Considering, Patrick Mahomes soon to be skyrocketing cap hit and whatnot. Rounds 4 and 5, you're looking at, and maybe that's when they decide to go linebacker, is rounds 4 and 5. Interior line prospects probably round 4 and 5. Probably hit up corner. Another option maybe in rounds 3, 4 is a developmental edge type player, like like Patrick Jones, someone who can bring some speed off the edge. So yeah. And the Chiefs' offense is so good. They might also want to try but I would say the biggest focus is for Kansas City, offensive tackles specifically, and maybe even drafting multiple offensive tackles, corner, and then I would say linebacker is a big one for them, and then maybe a developmental pass rusher. As much as you want to like replace Sammy Watkins, you've got Patrick Mahomes, you have Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman. I would focus on those other things. And so that wraps up the AFC West. It is 4:30. I've gone like 2.5 hours. So if you enjoyed the video or if you enjoyed the show today, please hit the like button. It really helps. It really does help out the channel. If you want more content, if you want to be reminded when I go live, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification next to the subscribe button. Flip that to all. That way you don't miss when I go live or when the archive gets posted later. Or like when it becomes like an official like archive later. And also you'll get notified if I start posting like individual videos too. So, because that's something I'm thinking about doing once I've moved out to my new space. And I do read the comments, so if you comment, I will read it. I will get to it. So I appreciate everyone who listened today, who tuned in the live show, or who's listening on the archive.